This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenawalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. And on this particular edition of Behind the Headlines, we're going to have an Arnold report. Our guest is Edward Arnold, who is the president of the Susquehanna Valley Center and one of the most distinguished businessmen in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Ed, welcome back to the show.
Nice to see you, Charlie.
It's nice of you to come and do another Arnold report. By the way, we urge our viewers, again, if you have any questions about international, national, or state finance or the economy, feel free to send questions to us at the email address on the screen. Please send them in, and we will bring them up in a future show, okay? Well, we have so much going on in international and national finance, Ed. Goodness, there are two incredible new books out. One is by Stephen King, and it's called Spend, Spend, Spend. And right away, the horror writer comes to mind, and it might be a picture of great horror, but it's the chief economist for the international bank HSBC, and he says that if the leading governments of the world continue to follow on the same financial course, the world is heading for major financial problems. And he's been backed up by a new book by Hedrick Smith, the former New York Times correspondent who had been based in the Soviet Union in the 1970s, wrote the Russians, among other things. He's written a new book on international finance as well, and pretty much believes in the same thing that Stephen King is telling us. As we look across the international financial system and we look across our nation's economy, what kind of presidential leadership do we have right now? What is the president thinking in terms of the economy and where we're headed? Some of us are having trouble seeing the logic or rationale in it, Ed.
Well, I think, unfortunately, what we're talking about, in my opinion, is we do not have, first of all, we do not have leadership. The one area that is, the House wanted to give the president the right to intelligently do the sequester in the fact that wherever it would make sense and wherever would get some of the government waste reduced, we'll give you the authority to do whatever you need to do. He refused. He said, I don't want to be the leader. I want to create blame. He does not want to be an honest, open, transparent government.
So the sequester was the president's idea to begin with, number one, and then number two, when he said, oh, my hands are tied and we have to cut this, this, and this, the House of Representatives said, we'll give you the power to change those amounts, and you're saying he chose to decline that.
In fact, he said he would veto it if they passed such a bill, because that would be leadership, which we obviously know he does not have. Again, the honesty of his record, right now we have just learned, and evidently these are proper records, that the director of the IRS has visited the White House over 160 times, more than any other cabinet member by far, way by far, 2-3 to 1, and yet the president says he knows nothing about the functions of the IRS, and they're attacking the conservative element in America to intimidate them.
That they were targeted.
Also, the fact that the not-for-profits, again, were not granted to, conservative organizations. But he, of course, is saying he knows nothing. Number one, as a leader, this is an important area that is going astray. You should know. But number two, the fact that you've met with the IRS this much makes great doubt that the president's honesty.
Well, what's the size of our current cash debt right now?
Well, this is the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand. You have actually three numbers here. Number one is, what is our annual deficit? And again, if you would look at it this way, and I'm going to jump back and forth here to compare the two, if you were an average American and you were basically living at $50,000 household income, but you were spending $75,000, That's a pretty big problem. Well, that's what our government is basically doing on an annual basis. Now, if you were to also, again, compare it to the government has this $15 trillion deficit, cash deficit. This is the one where we actually owe bonds out there to either our citizens, our banks, or people in the world. This would be like if an individual had $55,000 on his credit card. That would be probably the easiest analogy. Again, now we have the other liability, which is the most horrendous of all, is our government, and this is a number we can't even measure, except now we're still talking in trillions. Trillion is a million. It is an inconceivable number, which is why people sort of blank over when they talk about our government deficits. But again, it would be equivalent to our government right now is if you had a $400,000 debt, let's just say a mortgage on your house, but you had no way to pay the interest, no way to pay the principal, and there was no equity value in the house. That's what our government $100 trillion deficit is. But the worst part of that is its growth. Again, just as if you don't pay your interest, you don't make any payments on your mortgage liability is going to grow. Well, our government's pledged to different people and all these obligations are continuing to grow. And if you were to take simple numbers, 3%, which is a nice round number that people like to use, our economy, which is only a $15 trillion economy or thereabouts, if it grew 3%, which it's not, but it's growing around that, it would be growing less than $500 billion a year. Well, if you take this cash debt, you also take all these liabilities, and you would grow them at that same 3%, you would be growing at approximately 10 times greater than what your income is increasing. So therefore, if we, again, looking at you as an individual, you could say that, gee, my income is going to increase at $1,500 a year, but my debt is going to increase at $15,000 a year, again, because I'm making no payments on it, and I have no way, because I'm living way beyond my means. This is what I'm calling unsustainable government. And what is really probably frightening is, true, we are leading the way because we absolutely are not trying to do any austerity. The sequester now has forced us to a very small amount. The rest of the world has been doing, some countries have been doing a little bit, but overall, the world is doing the same thing. Its liabilities are growing drastically, its basic budgets are growing drastically, and there's no way to address this because they don't know how.
Let me throw a number out that I have heard before, and I agree with you. There are different numbers out there based on different criteria, but the number that I had heard, that if one was to add up all the current and the future liabilities of the federal government, the future Social Security, future Medicare, Medicaid, that we're looking at a liability of somewhere around $122 trillion.
That is correct. That is the number that I've used.
How does the United States cope? How does the United States approach dealing with such a number, Ed?
Well, I guess the first thing where you would start is your present deficit. How can we get right now, for every being kind, every $3 we are taking in, we're spending $4. So we're basically running approximately $1 trillion deficit a year. Well, therefore, before we worry about how we're going to pay back all the other liabilities, we first got to address how are we going to at least start to live close to within our means. And therefore, to say that our government is efficient is obviously we know that it's not so. It just isn't. no giant organization is totally efficient. But therefore, what is one of the biggest areas, which was what I've done, is sort of looked at where is the worst and the greatest failing of our government?
Well, certainly we find that with the New Deal, there was a transformation that occurred in the federal government then. With the New Deal, for the first time, we find that charity used to be handled by churches, by private families, by private groups, by the Salvation Army. And after the New Deal, now we find an increasing role for the federal government in the area of welfare, don't we?
Well, not actually after the New Deal.
And
the
it
New
grows.
Deal
It grows.
was workfare.
That's right. You're
Franklin
absolutely
Roosevelt
right.
did not believe in welfare. He
That's
created
true.
a tremendous number of jobs. We got our parks built. We got actually Lebanon High School built. There was a lot of things done, but people worked. They were not giving something for nothing. They were giving government jobs, government projects. The failure that when our government really started to go downhill was under Johnson in 1963, where he said we're going to do a war on poverty.
And the war in Vietnam at the same time.
And the war, so we could have guns and butter. Before that, we always basically became very, very let's say, frugal from a welfare spending standpoint. When we had a war, a la World War II, World War I, and so on, we had deficits, but we had the deficit because of the war. Now, all of a sudden, we had both.
And we have President Johnson's Great Society.
That's correct. And the Great Society has been a total failure, but of course, what does our government do? When you spend $1 that is spent poorly, the government's solution is then let's spend $2 or $3 the same poor way. Don't change anything, just throw more money at it. And this is basically where I say, yes, there is at least what I call a first step solution. Our welfare program, and it covers so many things, it's sort of mind-boggling, is now pushing up to $1 trillion. And what we're talking about here is that this is primarily the federal government we'll talk about, but the states are spending. Pennsylvania, as you have the little chart there, shows that the biggest single expenditure is education and welfare, which is between the two of them are consuming the overwhelming bulk of our monies. So, well, let's just talk about the federal level.
Yeah, well, here in Pennsylvania, indeed, when you look at our the proposed budget at the beginning of for 13-14 for public welfare, would be the largest part of the budget at 39%, and then you have pre-K to 12, grade 12 education. So primary and secondary education would be 35% of the budget, and higher education would be 6% of the budget. You have corrections coming in at 7% of the budget.
Now, just to get back to show how wasteful, and therefore you say, well, gee, you're being nasty, you want to hurt the poor. Right now, we're saying the poverty level in America is 18,500, yet we're spending $20,600 per welfare recipient, $62,000 per family, when the average family income in America is only $50,000. So we're spending more money on welfare people. But again, we have 126 federal agencies. We have 33 alone that are involved in housing under 4 cabinet departments. We have 21 that are involved in nutrition and food and things like that in 3 cabinet departments. The inefficiency and overlapping in our government, that plus the fraud that we have. So I do believe that if our government were to come up with an intelligent way to help the poor, you could in fact cut the cost by $500 million and not restrict what's going to the needy. But you also should have a system that has incentives for the needy to go out and learn and try to get a job. Right now we have a non-incentive because you make more not working than working under our present system. So therefore,
in the last 30 seconds, do you have any recommendations above workfare or improved workfare situation?
Well, I think we should go to workfare, where you would have to have set up a giant babysitting services, child care, which we're also spending a fortune on. I have here all the different kinds of programs that our government has, but just one that just talk about overlap.
The last 15 seconds.
Yes, that is, we have a lunch program and we have a breakfast program, and they're totally separate. Both of them are costing over $3 billion. Why wouldn't we have one child health care? Plus, we have several other areas that are helping child nutrition. Why don't we have one area that addresses child nutrition, not a half a dozen or more?
Okay, well, we will have to have you come back in the fall, in the new season of Behind the Headlines, and we will continue this conversation then. If you have questions of Mr. Arnold and the Arnold Report, please feel free to send them in, and we will address them on the air. Coming up in the next segment is Mara on location, giving us an update on the Marcellus Shale Coalition and the Marcellus Shale situation. Stay tuned for that. We'll see you next time.
Behind the Headlines is a production of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, a nonpartisan, nonprofit research organization helping Pennsylvania build a brighter future. Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions that make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Underwriters of America, a better way for truck insurance. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Penn Waste is proud to be a locally owned business. Since the company's founding in 2000, it has employed many of its neighbors as members of a dedicated team of professionals. Penn Waste is proud of its many contributions to the people of its service area, through support of numerous community organizations such as Christmas Addicts and the Junior League of York. One more way they improve the quality of life where they live and work.
Welcome back to a second segment of Behind the Headlines. We're here in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, on location at Range Resources, and we're talking with Matt Pitzarella. And this is my question for you today, Matt. What does Marcellus Shale mean to me?
Well, Marcellus Shale means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but ultimately what it's meant for Pennsylvanians are lower energy prices across the board, and not just in what you're paying every month on utility bills, but there are even greater potential savings that a lot of people, and especially smaller businesses, can experience because of Marcellus Shale activity. And then most importantly, it's provided jobs and economic stability for the Commonwealth. So if you think about it, if you added up all the taxes and fees that this industry pays, it's about $1.25 billion annually. That's $1.25 billion that didn't exist before Marcellus Shale activity. That's $1.25 billion that we as taxpayers wouldn't have to maybe pony up in higher taxes, and then obviously lower energy prices. So there's a lot of benefits to the average person, even if you're not living near drilling activity.
Well, I hear there are a lot of ways to convert cars to natural gas. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really exciting trend that's happening.
Could I do that?
Yeah, you could do that. And what it requires...
I mean, not myself, but yeah.
Well, if you have the appropriate level of training and certification from the federal government, you are permitted
I could do it then.
to be able to do those conversions, yeah. There are a lot of companies. There's more and more. A reputable company that comes to mind is a company called Zoresco.
Okay.
This is kind of their forte, and they also do a lot of fleet conversions on general for like utility trucks and construction vehicles. So they can do a lot of general retrofitting. So it was very easy for that company to be able to make that leap in that conversion. But you can actually buy cars directly from auto manufacturers. Range's fleet, for instance, is a combination of Chevy and Dodge trucks that run off both natural gas and gasoline. But you as a consumer, you could buy a Honda Civic that runs purely off of natural gas right now. A lot of the auto manufacturers will offer those biofuels from the factory. But if you wanted to convert it and you found a conversion company in your area that did that, in Pennsylvania it's about $8,000 per conversion, and that number may vary on a lot of factors. But it may cost you about $8,000 to do that conversion to your normal vehicle. Now the good news is it would reduce your gasoline, your fuel prices in half as a result of that. So that payback may be a few years.
So it is available to the average person.
Oh yeah. Anyone can take advantage of that right now. You can go out, make the conversion. Again, it all depends though. There needs to be refueling stations. In western Pennsylvania, it's a little bit easier. In parts of northeast Pennsylvania, it's getting a little bit easier as well. It all depends on, are there the refueling options?
Well, I understand that here in western Pennsylvania, Giant Eagle is adding more and more natural gas stations.
Well, Giant Eagle's been a real leader in this because they sort of said they have a commitment to cleaner energy as a primary value of that organization, but they also said, hey, there's a benefit in it. So what Giant Eagle was the first company to take a big, bold step. They said they were going to convert all of their vehicles. So their whole supply chain to provide groceries across Pennsylvania, they've made that conversion, and they've partnered with other businesses. But they're slowly converting a lot of their gasoline stations to make it easier. I mean, we can do this literally in countries that have nowhere near the standard of living that we have in the United States. They can run off of 2 or even 3 fuels at once. Why can't we do it here? And we're doing it more and more. Another thing, for instance, is waste management. They've been big leaders in this. So at a lot of the waste management facilities, the landfills, where they keep their trucks, there's usually a public option. So it helps them because it helps pay down their debt on the investment, but it helps you because you can take advantage of that fuel source as well.
Now, I understand the governor has also talked about moving the state fleet to natural gas or portions of it.
There's been a lot of talk in Pennsylvania. That's a big ball to start moving.
Yeah.
The DEP offers grants for municipalities and small businesses. Okay. So if you operate a small business fleet, there are many millions of dollars that are available to take advantage of those tax receipts to be able to make that conversion. The Commonwealth, however, has a big opportunity because they operate, in effect, the largest fleet.
Right. Hundreds and hundreds of cars.
Hundreds of vehicles, probably thousands.
Yeah.
So why, if you think about it and you say, well, Waste Management, pretty successful company, Giant Eagle, FedEx, all these big companies are able to do it and make a big financial gain out of it. Why can't the government also be that effective and nimble? And I think that you see a lot of interest in Harrisburg to be able to take advantage of that.
And then that should mean lower taxes for me, right?
Yeah, it should. If nothing else, it should slow the rate of government spending and all those things. But we'd all like to see it come
I know.
down.
I think there should be a direct correlation, but we'll see about that. Now, I know that our viewers are probably wondering, what is this that I have in front of me? And I was very excited that you wanted to share this with us because this is Marcellus Shale, correct?
It's a very expensive paperweight.
Yes, it is very heavy. I can tell our viewers it's heavy.
Yeah, but that is actually
beautiful.
Thank you. That is a core sample from actually the breakthrough, the Gula number 9 well, which was the horizontal well that really cracked the code and proved to the world that the Marcellus Shale.
From 2004?
That one's actually from 2006, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. The first Marcellus well was in 2004, but it took a few years to
be able to pull this out.
To perfect it. But what the geophysicists do is they extract those core samples and then they conduct a battery of tests. It's really shale gas development is NASA. It is the tech boom that we have lived through. It's very high technology, and we apply those same incredibly high scientific, high-tech standards and methodologies to what it is that we do. And the best way to think about how do we you picture that a couple 100 feet thick, a mile deep, how are we able to make the Marcellus Shale, which is now the largest producing gas field in the United States of America, how is it able to come out of that? And a real simple way to think about it is shale gas has taken about 30 years to perfect in this country. That's how long we've been doing it. Think about what your automobile looked like 30 years ago and what an automobile looks like today. Same technology, same basic premise, same thing with us, horizontal drilling, hydraulic fracturing. But the big difference is the technological innovations. Your automobile now is lighter, safer, faster, more fuel efficient, and it has more technology in it than you probably ever thought you'd have in your house.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with our technology. It's made those kinds of advancements that's allowed us to unlock these huge reserves here in the United States.
Wow, I think this is very, very cool, and thank you for bringing this for us to show today. So, Matt, how long have you been with Range Resources?
I joined Range in 2008.
Okay.
So, in my line of work, I do a lot of different things with Range, but one of the things that I deal with a lot is the news media, and my story is I can remember when I used to have to beg reporters to write about the Marcellus Shale, and then I went through a period where I begged them not to, and now I just beg them to be honest,
Okay.
for the most part. But it's been a real crazy last few years, and again, to think about, not that long ago there were people that were even doubting that there was gas in the Marcellus, to it now being the largest producing gas field in the United States, and it's happening here in Pennsylvania, is really amazing. It's an incredible thing to happen here in Pennsylvania. Big opportunities for all of us.
Well, and you sort of answered my question already, but what's one of the biggest changes you've seen, other than your dealings with the media?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's been the biggest surprise is that it has happened faster than I think anyone thought possible. I'm not sure. For instance, the Marcellus Shale Coalition released a study that they commissioned researchers at Penn State in 2008 to put this study out, which said in 10 years the Marcellus could be the largest producing gas field, and it happened in 4 years. That is the kind of increased ramp up in activity, because we now have the appropriate framework for this research, for this industry to develop, and to allow people like us to even talk about maybe converting our own cars to run off of it instead of foreign crude.
Well, I know that there was talk early on in Marcellus Shale that it was going to last around 75 years, that's as long as the benefit would be to Pennsylvania and probably to the nation in general. But with these other layers of shale, we're going to get the benefit of this natural resource for a lot longer. Isn't that true?
This is going to take decades and multiple generations, and I think anyone that would try to, and there were people 10 years ago that said by this point we would be out of oil and gas. So I think anyone that even tries to put a time period on it is probably just taking a guess. But what we do know is there's more oil and gas in the United States than we ever dreamt possible.
Thank you so much for having us again, Matt. We really enjoy coming out to Canonsburg and learning what's going on with Marcellus Shale. And so we thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Well, thank you. The pleasure is all ours.
Okay, thank you. We'll be back next time for a new edition of Behind the Headlines.
Behind the Headlines is a production of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, a nonpartisan, nonprofit research organization helping Pennsylvania build a brighter future.